Hey everybody, welcome to Corona. I'm gonna share with you the story of the Copernican Revolution. What is that? That is the time in our history where we changed our opinion from believing that the Earth was the center of the universe to the belief that the Sun was the center of the universe. And as the name implies, it was a revolution which happened over the period of like 300 years. It really took a while, and depending on how you count it, it might have been 700 years. So, very interesting long story about how science takes a while to get it right and sticks with the wrong model for quite a long time because it's actually the best thing going until it isn't, and then they still stick with it. Anyway, uh, in the 1100s, some scholars out of like what is now Baghdad and Persia, Iran, had some really sophisticated ideas about both gravity and how the planets work. But technology and the transmission of ideas, publication politics, who knows what, they are credited for those ideas, but it didn't seem to transfer to the gestalt that was happening in like the 1500s when people mostly describe the Copernican Revolution as having begun, maybe the late 1400s. So prior to Copernicus, there was the Aristotelian or the Ptolemaic model. And it was the best thing going, like there was really nothing better and no reason to have a different model for everything that was observable at that time. Keep in mind, they didn't have any understanding of gravity. They had, well, they thought kind of like the Earth is like a magnet and everything else is like metal. And they didn't really understand why like planets going overhead didn't just fall in, but they might have had the idea, based on some of the scholars in the 1100s, that it doesn't fall in because this magnet gets counteracted by like the force of centripetal force of like if you swung a tennis ball with a string, that it would counteract the force or whatever. But there wasn't much discussion about it in everything that I've read. So I don't know. Anyway, I mean, it's fascinating to me that whatever they came up with, it was just observation. There was no understanding of gravity. Maybe talk more about that later. So it was fine. It was great. It explained everything, but it was kind of clunky, like ugly as hell. Actually, they have one of the easy observations they could make was that Mars goes across the sky and does this kind of reverse, comes back, and then so it does this weird transit across the sky. But their model worked. It explained this by saying that the planets that go around the Earth do this funky like cycle around the cycle around, like they do kind of like a spiral around the Earth. At least some of them do, and that's what explained like Mars, for example. But that was like not everybody bought into that, but of course people are kind of on the down low about it because the church liked things the way they were. But for example, a king in Leon or some kind of royalty like required that a report go on his desk explaining all of this Aristotelian garbage. And they put a report on his desk and he looked at it and he's like, this is trash. I hate this. So Copernicus was not without his friends when it came to his idea. And so along he comes and he's like, I don't think so. I think shit goes around the sun. In fact, if you figure it out that way, it explains Mars a lot better because you got the Earth and you got Mars and then you got the Earth. You got the sun and you got the Earth and you got Mars. And if the Earth travels around the sun faster than Mars, it will appear that Mars is doing this zigzag across the sky from the perspective of the Earth. So he's like, it's a super simple model. Why the hell not? But that's the beauty of the model, was really all it had going for it. It actually didn't predict the measurements better than the Aristotelian model. So, but it had a fan club, a small fan club. There was a king out of what is now maybe Austria or Germany that was like, cool, Copernicus, I like you. I like your ideas. Write that shit up and we will publish it. So Copernicus is like, hell yeah. So he writes it up, but unfortunately, it had to go through, a horse and buggy and got a translator and typesetting and God knows what. and the message got a little lost in translation. By the time the manuscript came back to Kepler or Copernicus, on his deathbed, it was changed. The preface of the book read such that you would think the book was making an entirely different claim, and people might have. There's people that theorize about what was happening or why that happened, and possibly to protect Copernicus's ideas from the church. Anyway. Copernicus didn't get burned at the stake, so in that sense, I guess it worked. But when he saw that changed manuscript on his deathbed, people argue that that's what pushed him over the edge and made him die. So anyway, his ideas didn't go forward as a result, but he does get the credit since we have the original manuscript and we know that he wrote it. So anyway, he dies, and after that, along comes Kepler. Kepler is a mathematician, and he thinks that shit goes around the sun. He's all about that. But he's not able to make much headway. He's more than anybody else. I think some more measurements are made, some more precise measurements. But his model, just using spheres, isn't cutting it. Like, just using circles. And he's like, he publishes some stuff, but nobody really gives a shit. And so he's like, okay, fuck it. And he kind of gives up, moves on, does some other shit. Meanwhile, at the same time, Galileo is pushing his own science, his own ideas, and he's a bit of like a baller, mover shaker guy, connected in with royalty, and he's a good politician. And people think that he invented the telescope, but he in fact kind of just packaged it, but to his benefit and the benefit of everybody else. He makes more precise measurements, and he's trying to push forward his ideas, which he's not having Kepler's ellipses thing. He doesn't give a shit about that. He wants to push his own thing as a scientist. So he's like super aggro about it. And he tries to publish a book. Things are going basically okay, but then like a war happens, and the Catholic Church starts to get hella threatened by ideas that go against its doctrine, which I guess Protestant ideas, which is, I don't know who the hell is Protestant and who's Catholic in this fucking picture. But anyway, Galileo does publish his book, but the church is like, I'm not feeling you. And so they put him in jail and they ban his book. But Kepler is just going along, plotting along, real humble, no big deal. And during that time in math, there becomes like a fascination with ellipses. And again, Kepler was making no headway, and so he's like, well, shit, all right, let me just apply ellipses to my ideas here and see if this improves things. And it does. And not only does it improve things, he's able to make future predictions based on measurements, which, the more refined measurements that he's able to apply from Galileo, as well as he's like, this model super works. It works better than anything else. And at that point, the Aristotelian model was really starting to fail because the measurements were becoming more precise. And he's like, not only is my model hella, but like I predict that Mercury is going to look like this and Venus is going to look like that the next time somebody makes measurements. And he's right. People make measurements of Mercury and it's exactly on target. Venus gets all kind of jacked up because of, I don't know, it's like a cloudy day or it's behind some planet or I don't know what, but it eventually gets measured and proven that he's right. So he has a friend in the, again, German royalty business, and he gets his stuff published, and that remains. Like, it doesn't get banned by the church. I forget exactly what circles he ran in or why that's the case, whereas Galileo didn't do so well, but they're alive both at the same time. And there's a couple things that are interesting in this story. Galileo's telescope, or it's not his, but the telescope that he uses, it's the first time that they're able to see like solar flares, like this idea that, holy shit, not only is there like this bright thing in the sky, but it's got all this shit going on. And like they could see pits on the moon, and like, I don't know, I think it kind of sparks the public's imagination as to like, Jesus, the universe or the Earth may not be the center of what's interesting out there. And so not only is there evidence in the form of science, but there's also kind of this opening of imagination of like, whoa, that's cool, what else could be out there? So yeah, Kepler winds up being the dude, and those ideas basically catch fire. Those ideas go forward in time, and that never gets reversed. And then soon after Kepler dies, along comes Newton, and Newton stands on the shoulders of a lot of giants from Persia, as well as a guy right before him in Italy. Newton gets credited for being the guy. He's like, force equals ma. I can explain this and this and this, but I think he actually is overcredited, and other scholars are undercredited for a lot of these minor contributions, which add up to a major kind of bigger picture idea. So anyway, that is the story of the Copernican Revolution.